Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Listen in as we discuss all things business, growth, and marketing with business owners, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, founder of Roundhouse, the creative agency, Saul Edmonds.
Hello, everyone. This is the Grow Your Business podcast again. And today I have finally, after 3,000 years, finally have the chance to talk to good friend Kate Smith.
We're finally doing it.
Kate, how are you?
I'm very well, Saul. How are you?
I'm good. It's a good, I don't have to say the thing that I usually say to people, which is like when they're overseas and I go, tell everyone like where you're from in the world and like what the weather's like.
We're in the same city.
We're in the same city, and that's Brisbane. So I guess for people who are listening who aren't in Brisbane, we're both in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm. And the weather is glorious, as it really is.
Yeah, it is. It's good. It's very nice in Queensland, and we're a couple of designers, and we make stuff for people, don't we, Kate?
We do. Make stuff look good.
Make it look good. So there's probably going to be like stacks of people who know like a fair bit about you already because we're in like similar circles with like networking and stuff. So for those people, some of the things we're talking about won't be news, but some of them probably will be. But for those people who don't know who you are and what you do, I'll still ask you to give people a bit of an overview about who you are and what you get up to. And also, I guess like a little short version of how you came to be here at this particular point in your life.
Oh, could be a really long question.
That's okay.
We've got time.
Yeah, we've got time.
I'm Kate. I'm a graphic designer and visual branding specialist. My business is Rove Creative, and it was Rove so that I wanted to help the tourism industry. I wanted to see more people getting out on adventures, less time inside buying things, more time outside exploring. And I also wanted that for me. So even though I kind of niched out of tourism with COVID, I'm definitely still a rover and kept the business name going. I guess how I came to be here in this particular place. We could go back to school where my maths book was full of drawings.
As far back as you like.
Good. Then my maths book, I would write question 1, A, and then there would be a drawing of a horse or a flower or something. Yeah, maths was never high on the priority list, but art, design, I used to make funny little, I guess they were logos. They were my first logos of my friends' names. We thought of them like graffiti because that was cooler, but I didn't graffiti it on anything. I was not that.
You didn't realize, or did you realize at the time, like, is this in primary school or high school?
This was high school, I guess. Yeah.
That's kind of when I guess, because I've sometimes thought back to when I started, the genesis of then what came later, at what point that was. I've often reflected on that, and for me, it's always been it was very much about Lego. Because I had a mate next door, a little friend called Rory. Rory Clennon. Rory, if you're listening. Rory, then I met years later after when he and I were grown-ups, and he became an industrial designer, and I became a designer, artist type person. I mean, similar to you, similar kind of set of interests and skills, and we both bonded again. It was actually at an art opening years ago that I was involved in, and he just sort of turned up, and we were both uniformly acknowledged the significant role Lego had played in our lives. It was really funny.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and we were both like, yes, Lego. It was this bonding over the point, for me, and then for him, it was the point of kind of engineering, building things, and creativity. It was that mix. And then, yeah, that was really interesting. So it was when you would, you're doing what then now reflecting on, you go, oh yeah, that's like a logo. Did you think of it like that, or you were just, how were you thinking about it then
Oh,
as a
I was
kid?
in high school. I wasn't thinking much at all about anything except when I could finish school and get out of there. But no, I wasn't thinking about it that way. I knew I loved art, and I would do that over anything else in the curriculum. But I was also told that there was no future in such a career. So I
Yeah.
never, I didn't pursue it heavily, and certainly not right out of school. I wasn't going for a career like this. I did some boring things, and business admin. I was a receptionist for a while. I worked in shops and did retail and hospitality. And I thought, well, none of this is for me. So what is? And I was actually just lucky enough that a friend started doing graphic design at TAFE. And I thought, well, if she can do it, I can do it. Why don't we do it?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, because now, like, it's really easy for us, and I guess this actually probably applies in a similar way to a lot of other people with what they currently now go, oh yeah, that's part of their identity.
Mm.
Like we wouldn't think of ourselves like any other way. Like we do this for people, and you build things and make things, and it seems, but it's funny then when you actually do think back and go, actually, there was a time when that really wasn't wasn't me. And then I've often second guessed myself, and I've thought, no, it probably was. And I thought, no, it actually wasn't. Like it actually, and the example for me was like, I still went to Queensland College of Art and studied illustration. So that's like a very, literal. So that's, my wife and I, like, we're both the sort of illustrator art people first and having art exhibitions. And I thought, blindly at the time was like, I'll just become an artist. I'll just do art. And I had like some success, but then after that, I went through another thing of like, actually, because nobody at that point in time really equipped us for any, real world job related to those skill sets. Like it was
Right.
one of the best things I ever did. Like, don't get me wrong, it was one of the best times of my life, and met Jill and like everything, and it was like really important. But I came out of it going, oh, now, and then I did a course. I had to do a course at what is now, I think, SAE Quantum. It was like another. Oh, that's right. It was called the Commercial Art Training Center, and about like how to use Photoshop and how to use this, and at the time Macromedia and freehand and all that.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
that was like a big, and I was like, sort of gravitated towards that fairly quickly, but that seemed like a big leap then. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I've got these skills. And then, so it's kind of logical, but also a bunch of stuff had to happen to make that as a catalyst. And it's funny, that journey, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, everything seems logical in hindsight, right? You can look back on your origin story and piece it together, but you weren't working towards that at the time. You were just kind of jumping to the next possible thing or probable thing, or something amazing sort of landed in your lap that you hadn't considered before. Often I find has happened to me.
Yeah, because then for me too, I was like, oh, well, that's probably not going to work out. I think, yeah, that's right, because then it was after that I did that. And then I thought, well, I can't remember if this was influenced from other people, me, or a combination. Then I was like, oh, well, I need to get like a proper job. I became like an art teacher. And then I ended up, but then like a stroke of fate or luck in retrospect again, is that then that was like a time when I did my diploma and didn't get it. Like there was no jobs for teachers in Queensland at that point. Like it was a really low point. And so I like applied for jobs and stuff, didn't get a job. And then, but it equipped me. Then I had some like teaching skills and other things. So that was then kind of handy, but good then in retrospect, because then I could have perhaps stayed in that.
Yeah.
And like it's funny, like these pathways that you go down that do seem always in retrospect, like you said, like they almost seem predetermined because of hindsight.
But they weren't.
But they weren't, no.
Becoming a teacher, it would have been a much bigger leap to enter the entrepreneurial world as you have.
Yeah, but then I was actually talking about this on another podcast too, about what you don't realize at the time, but actually are influences that ultimately lead to, say, like running your own business. Because I've had this realization kind of recently, which was about that I actually had a lot of influence in my family in entrepreneurial ways, because my mum ran a corner store and my dad was doing a range of different things for other people, but it was always very sort of independent. And then we had another store that I ran, and then I ran like an art supply store at the Queensland College of Art. So I actually did all these things that I never associated with being actually helping me be a business owner. But they clearly were.
They all channel into it.
Yeah, it's like dealing with people and like ordering, but that was sort of retail and stuff. But it's like, oh yeah, they are really. And I had this.
The service is definitely a part of what we do.
Yeah, fairly recently. So like the whole travel thing for you, did that initially start just on the level of it would be really great because you love traveling, and the fact that we have this way to be able to work wherever we are, like the ease of that, like is there then like another deeper level to why that's great, like with how you even think about design, like the traveling, like some sort of connection there?
Well, I guess as my adult life progressed, I did study design. I started working in design here in Australia, and then I moved to Canada and I worked in design there, and that was great. And of course, I then spent 6 weeks in Europe. I caught the travel bug. I went home and tried to have a normal life, and it didn't work out. I found myself suddenly in New Zealand, not knowing how I got there. And and I was working at a ski resort, and I was a barista. And I actually quite like this job because you get to talk to people all day.
Yeah.
You can make pictures on the latte, so still get to be a little bit creative. And I got to ski for free. And every time I would tell someone what I studied, they would say, "Oh, that's great. You can do that from anywhere." And I said, "Yeah, so why aren't I doing that?"
People have said that to me too.
Yeah.
That to me too. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, I guess because we do think about, we know that, right? But yeah, that's actually funny you should say that, because I've had, like, that's been a common thread, people sort of bring that up, that for them, because I guess maybe because in their job then they can't, like it's sort of tied to a location.
Yeah, true.
But ours is unique in the sense that it doesn't have to be. So for other people, that's more of a standout than for us, it's like, doing it all the time is normal.
Yeah, and that's just a facet of it that we don't necessarily consider. But yeah, I found this everywhere I went. I moved to Japan after that, and I couldn't work in design there. My Japanese is rubbish. So once again, working in customer service, reception, all these things. And it was funny because when I worked in these kind of roles that were customer facing, I missed design. And then when I moved to Chile and somehow got a design role in Chile, even though my Spanish is also pretty bad, I missed the customer facing roles because I didn't have a lot of customer interaction in those roles when I was just a designer in an agency. And then when I started my business, it was the perfect mixture, because now I get to talk to all my clients. I get to understand truly what their needs, their business challenges are, and what they're just going through on a day-to-day basis, and, try and be a positive force in the world, but also get to do the design and creativity. And then on the flip side, I get to see that out in the world, in their businesses, in real time, the impact it makes on them. And so I feel like I've weaved between these two sort of careers, and now I'm just in the best place ever. So
yeah, you are in the best place ever. Yeah, I mean but like, and I'm only saying it like that because I have the advantage because I sort of see you then in the real world too. So you see, but like, you can tell when people are really happy about what they do. It's just, you don't have to be an expert in psychology to know, like, it's really obvious. And people also who talk about you and your work too. And that's interesting because when you say you and your work, that's like a key, like, it's not just people going, oh, Kate did a fantastic thing, like, Andrew, who's like your best advocate ever. And he does a great job at it too, but it's really, really genuine. And it's nice because that's, you can't buy that sort of response, and it always has to come genuinely from people. People can't make it up. Like, it just is very obvious. And when they see you talk about it, and you're pretty good at that too. You've had a bit more practice now after a bunch of, like, how long is it since sort of networking, like, since you started that? How many years?
I think it'll be 3 years in like March or April. So I guess, yeah, two and a half-ish years. That's been a hell of a journey, learning how to talk about what you do in a way that people will understand it. I think it's everyone's biggest challenge in networking.
It's still my challenge. Like, it's still challenge, not in the sense that I don't know how to do it, but sometimes, like, when you, because there's always new people, and it's an ongoing, but it is an ongoing process of finding out what resonates with people. Or, I mean, there's no magic bullet. There's no, like, ultimate thing that you say or do. Like, it's just, it's a process, isn't it? Like, it's still, but it's interesting in that environment. And for people who haven't picked up generally on what we're talking about, just talking about, like, real world networking in groups when we're talking to people. And but, like, the big advantage of that, and you get, like, some of it on Zoom, next best thing, but you see people's responses and you can then feel it too. And I think that's a underrated piece of, like, even if you look at it from market research point of view, like, not just networking, getting business, making connections and all that good stuff. There's, like, real world feedback you can get. Like, you say something and you can see people, go, oh yes, or absolutely dead bored.
Connected with it, or they've not at all. It's funny you were saying there's no silver bullet, but there's a couple of people in our group who I think just nail this. And I love this from a branding perspective. Yeah. Vinny, you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Saul.
Yes.
Vinny gets up every fortnight and he says, "Hi, I'm Vinny. I'm a tailor. I make men look delicious." And we all laugh every single time, and we all remember Vinny and what he does. I think Danny Sun is another one.
Yes.
Gets up and she says, I'm a real estate agent. I do property management too. I'm the Karate Kid of real estate. She's from China. And so she gets up and says this, and we all have a giggle, and everyone remembers the Karate Kid of real estate. Who doesn't want the Karate Kid on their side? So I think there's some really powerful things we can say if we're brave enough to really embrace a persona or that. You can call it a brand.
Yeah. It is. It's very interesting and very cool. And I say that not just in that loose way, but it's really cool and interesting because for me, like outside of the fact that I'm like those two people, that example, they're very comfortable in doing that. And that's obviously our first step, is just being okay with that. And that comes by, sometimes it's naturally you, plus a bit of practice, all those different things. But then the common thread there too is there's that humor in like a self-effacing sort of humor, and that willingness to put yourself out there, like you said. Like I think that's kind of a big deal. Like and I'm naturally, like, even though like I'm doing a goddamn podcast and I'm talking to people, like I'm naturally, a big part of me is like fairly insular, and I like, like sitting down and making things and pottering around with stuff. But like you, I really like people. I like stories, and so the
And I
bridge.
guess
Yeah,
you're probably quite self-aware of that too, and it's probably one of the reasons you do this podcast, I imagine, is to have these kind of conversations and get out of that insular mode, because
it probably is. Yeah. I don't think I just sort of started it around COVID. Once again, for like other kind of reasons that haven't been the ones why I keep doing it. It's not, because it actually wasn't. I didn't start going, I'm going to be like, for what you said, and go, because I'm going to be like, I'm going to really push myself. I was not like that at all. It wasn't like, there's nothing. I was just like, should start a podcast because other people doing it. Sounds like a good idea. That's about it. But, and also because like there's a part of, like, I generally I'm a fan of then hearing other interesting podcasts and stories. So I feel like I could do that, and see how it goes.
Yeah. I love that you've said that, actually, because the other thing, we've touched on this whole like story of how you got where you are, and we make up a nice one that sounds good after the fact, but that's the main reason we're mostly doing stuff, is because, someone else is doing that and that seems cool.
Yes.
Why don't I try it? And that is such a valid reason to do anything in life. I think too many people are just paralyzed by, I don't know, I need a good reason to do something. No, go out and try stuff. I think that's the best reason to start.
100%. I mean, I think I've often reflected on this thing that I think had been quite informative, like being early days at Queensland College of Art. And it was this thing that was obviously designed to kind of break people out of really bad sort of creative or art habits, like when they entered Queensland College of Art. And our lecturer, Chris, at the time, there was this whole series of different exercises and stuff. This was in first year, which was about, doing things like sort of at speed, but lots of them, and it'd be like 100 drawings you got to do. And we got like an afternoon session, you got to do like 100 drawings of this one thing in as many different ways as you can. And people are really locked into, they're used to drawing really carefully, or they're like watercolors, or they're like this or that. And it's like breaking people out of a mold to in the Matrix sense, like to free your mind.
Yeah.
But it was really true, and it really worked. And was something that was a great catalyst then to start to think about things in different ways. And like that, just doing stuff, like you said, like the whole sort of Nike thing, like just do it. It's really true. Just like kind of just get out there, do it, see how it works. If it doesn't work, do a different variable of it, try something else, but at least then
Yeah, and you can find the meaning later, whatever it ends up being. I actually love doing that because of X, Y, and Z. But I wanted to touch on what you said about the what your art teacher made you do, because how valuable must that be in what you do now for the iterative process of branding or any kind of design? I think oftentimes we get so attached to something because we're like, this is it. I think this is the best one. And I know with my interns, I've always kind of done this to them as well. They're like, here, I've finished. I'm like, okay, now do 5 more. And they're like, but
Yes.
it's here, it's done. I'm like, yeah, but your 5th one is going to be that, but 20 times better just because you've broken it all apart and rebuilt it in a different way and tried something new. And, 4 out of the 5 might be rubbish, but you needed to do the 4 rubbish ones to get the 5th brilliant one.
Yeah.
Did you find that at art school?
Yeah. Well, I like even now too, or then sometimes the flip side, you go, okay, you do like the other 5 or 6 or whatever, and then it just helps you realize more than it would have otherwise that the first one is the best one.
Yeah.
Like I find that personally, that's sometimes, not always, but sometimes, if I'm lucky, that like the first draft of like some design, especially with a brand logo, like the first instinctive one, or at least the base idea ends up being like, I find that more often than not that I'll go this, and then I do have to do other ones, and I go, yeah, that's a good one too. There's different variation, but I do carry through, like on your sort of question about the importance of doing all that stuff. I do actually still find, and I don't think I thought about it like this until you asked that, but I do actually do, like say in our tools, like, in Illustrator especially, my artboard, like outside of the, for people who don't know what we're talking about, like there's like a digital, sort of artboard that might be, say, A4 size, which you end up exporting like on that size. But there's a whole lot of stuff outside that on the canvas. And my canvas just looks like a dog's breakfast. It's just like I've got, it's literally like the equivalent of the artist, which is, I think, probably how I used to work in doing art anyway, is you got like stuff everywhere. And I'm just like going, I've got like a half Frankenstein bit of a logo here. And like, it's really not very neat. It's actually very logical though to me.
Same.
If somebody else looked at it, they'd be like, ooh,
I know exactly what you're talking about.
What's going on? I got like, and also it's from a practical point of view, because I just I'm always paranoid about going too far with something and then not having the version 3 or 4 times ago where I can break it apart or redo it if I need to. If someone goes, hey, can you change this? Like, got that version. So I've got like all these like pre-versions, and then I slowly whittle it down, like probably very much like when a sculptor starts with this and they take away, like there's like an adding to it and a taking away process.
Yes.
But the in between bit is like all over the shop. But I guess I know other people just don't work like that at all. Like other design friends who are very like way more clean and probably do most of the thinking in their mind instead of on the on the canvas. But I can't do that.
I do it exactly like you. It's this complete, it's like a lineage. It's like looking at the generations of a logo from its inception to, what do they call it? Evolution over millions of years, but, millions of seconds perhaps. And I just copy paste to the next one, play with something a little bit different. Maybe that's good. Okay, copy paste, try something a little bit different, and see which one natural selection selects, and that's usually the end one. But it's funny what you said. It is often the very first idea I come up with that is a winner, and often the client picks it and you're like, why did I have to do all the extra work?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not. And sometimes I'm like, well, I'm going to do the process. I'm going to make all the mess, the giant canvas craziness, and something else incredible comes out, and I'm like, that's the actual brand, and that's what it should be.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think I agree. It's either, for me, there's not too many shades of grey in between. It's either, I find more often than not, I've got a very specific idea that comes to me and I'm like, I'm going to try and execute that. And then there's just a creative process to make that into something good. And there's a few different variables, color, shape, whatever. Or there's a sort of like something very, very specific from the client. that, and actually, funnily enough, now that we're talking about this, funnily enough, I kind of like, I'm not sure what this says about me. Maybe it means I'm a masochist. But like that, when people give me like a brief where initially my response is, how the hell am I going to work with that idea? I have this part of me, which is like me going, maybe it's the part of me when people say no, yes, I say no. It's probably that part. It's like, where I go, I'm going to make this particular challenge. This is going to be like the best thing I've ever done, like that, because there's these arbitrary or seemingly, and obviously not arbitrary, very important to someone, but then I was like, but then sometimes I find only in retrospect, once again, that at the time I was like, oh, that's annoying, or that's difficult, or whatever things you make up in your mind. And then in retrospect, I go, that was a really good idea that the client had. And it seemed, because I didn't do it and it looked like it was going to be hard, I had a preconceived idea.
Mm-hmm. But it actually took you down a road that you wouldn't.
But it was good, and I only found out that it was good on their part because then I sort of made it work, and then I was kind of thankful for that. And that still happens, and I know that process happens, and I still fall into that trap and still go, oh, that's going to be, like this, and then I go, okay, Saul, just remember back to all the other hundreds of times that's happened.
Yeah.
Just remember, this has happened before.
We will make it work. I know people often tell me like, oh, I want it like this. I had a client once and they said, so we talked to ChatGPT. I'm like, cool. And he said the icon for this brand should be a pink heart. And I'm like, okay, cool. So what's the brand personality like? And we went through a bit of a process with this. I'm like, is it feminine or masculine? They're like, oh, definitely masculine. I'm like, this is going to be so interesting.
Heart with swords on it.
It didn't end up being a heart, but we did the process of using that heart took me into this other direction. It ended up being a padlock. So first it was a heart padlock, and then they really liked that. Yeah. And it was a big, heavy, pink kind of round heart, padlock that, had some heart connotations, but.
Because men have feelings too.
You do. I know it.
You just have to let them show it. That's all.
Right. And show it in their own way.
Yeah.
So, and it took me down this way that I wouldn't have gone for that particular brand.
I like that. That's always exciting to me when you have that's like the happy, the other big thing that was linked to what I was talking about before with doing all that stuff where you have a time limit is like the ability to let a happy accident happen. Mm-hmm. Because by default, by the name and by the nature of it, you can't engineer it. Like you have to do something in a particular way, and it's obviously hit and miss, but you can come to different avenues by putting yourself in a situation where one part of your mind it can't do its thing. It's got to just go into, would be the right way to say it, like some sort of mechanism to get it done. And you're obviously injecting, creativity, but you can't then spend too long on it. You just have to do stuff. And then things come out of that process, sometimes which are surprising, and you wouldn't have been able to plan for that. Mm-hmm. And they can sometimes, not always, sometimes they're just not very good ideas and you just have to discard them. But
there's lots of those. That's part of the process.
Yeah, but that's the good part too, because sometimes then you can use them for other things, that's not appropriate. And funny, I actually said the first thing that jumped into my head when you were talking, and I went, oh, with two swords with the heart.
Yeah.
Because immediately I jumped to, do you remember, or did you have any contact ever with Rock and Roll Circus in Brisbane?
No, I don't even know what that is.
Rock and Roll Circus was, I'm not sure if they're around still, but they were like a sort of a really edgy circus, essentially. Like they were doing like, sort of extreme stunts and circusy stuff. They were in Brisbane for a long time, and they had the best logo. And it was just like this. It was a harp, but it was more like a still felt very much like a harp, but it was almost drawn like in a vectory sort of way, but it was like drawn almost like a real heart with some valves and stuff, but like a bit heart shaped, and it had these. I can't remember, there was one or two daggers like through it, and it was like the best. I always loved this logo. It was just so perfect for everything that they did, because they used to they were around in Brisbane for a long time, and they would sometimes be at like music festivals playing, and they'd have these different shows and acrobatics and all sorts of, but like edgy, like freaky, circusy stuff. It was really good. And that's always been a great example when I think back to like a brand logo that was really illustrated, not just kind of represented, but like really illustrated the essence of everything they did. It was just absolutely perfect.
But it's funny because I'm sure they didn't stab anyone's bare heart on the stage, but that personality of what that sort of
knife in the heart. It was like passion, dirty. Yeah. It was like gritty. It was like a little bit of like violence, but fun. It was just kind of, but always, and then not necessarily something you put into words easily.
No.
But I always felt it was like absolutely perfecto. It was like right on the money.
Right, and that is what good logos and good branding does. It creates that feeling more than anything. That's what I always think. It needs to create a feeling, whether that feeling is just stability. Maybe you're an accountant and you just need to know that you're trustworthy and you're a stable place for someone to trust with their money. It just needs to create that feeling. And rock and roll, that sounds like a
Rock and Roll Circus, because it was also actually for me too, it was kind of like I think at the time, and even now thinking about it, is like when you put in, it was like a clash of two, even though rock and roll and circus are complementary, but also rock and roll circus is like that idea. There's kind of this clash of worlds. It was like this meets this equals like boom.
Explosions.
Explosions. And it was like even literally sometimes like that. It was just like gritty and edgy, and like some people listening will probably remember rock circus, but they're awesome. But like in terms of meaning about branding, because like a lot of our, what we've been talking about, and I guess what you were saying just a while back, like what's the I'll start with like a pretty open question, like what does meaningful branding sort of mean to you, if you had to say, not specifically for a particular brand, but what does that term like mean to you as a designer? And then I guess what would you like it to mean, or what does it end up meaning to clients, do you think? Meaningful.
Yeah, this is very close to my heart, the meaningful brand. And so I've sort of made a process for this, and part of it is pulling things out. If you've got a mission and vision, if you've got values for your business, and a lot of people don't have them written down and can express them in a way that, they've got a corporate document to do so, but we all have these and we all run on them, whether we're conscious of them or not. We've got this idea of what the world should be like, and that is our vision, and we've got this thing that we want to do, and that's our mission. we operate under certain principles that we think are important. We don't necessarily write down our values and think about them, but we'll have them. They're all there. So in my brief process, I try to get all those things out, and hopefully at the same time, I'm getting a good idea of that person's personality, because I like to do the brief process either in person or on a call. And all these things can be woven into a brand and create that feeling through the visuals. I then like to take it a step further even. I like to ask people about their goals when they're doing branding. Like, what are your goals for the business? Tell me about your dream business in 5 years. There's no ifs, buts, maybes. This is the dream business. What does it look like if everything goes right? Tell me about that. And so they tell me this vision that they have of the future. And if I can tie something in to remind them of that vision, that's a big goal for me. So I think Lara Arden, who you know, she's the business awards coach, she told me her dream is to help 1 million people be recognized or feel recognition through business awards. And so that could be, you know, if she helps one company win an award, maybe 50 people in that company feel recognition. So yeah, this was the goal, 1 million people. Anyway, when I was designing hers up, we landed on this trophy, and the trophy was a bit boring, and, you know, a star was another bit of iconography that we discussed that could be used. And I thought, what if I have a star on the trophy? And then I made the star have 6 points. And nobody would make this connection except that I, you know, thought of it and told her about it. The 6 points stands for the 6 figures in 1 million. And no one's going to know that. And it's not important that they do, but every time she sees it, she's going to go, there's my 1 million, and I'm going for it.
Yes, that's a great point. And that's, yeah, I've had similar experiences, and sometimes it's with people who do articulate that straight away to there's something very important, or it comes like through that process. I remember actually like a really wonderful client who used to be a filmmaker, and she and this is like years ago now when we first did her logo, and she had a very like some people, like it's not like it's easy for us because we think about design all the time, but a lot of people, like, it's very hard to visualize things, or to know what is going to be good, or to know, or to and sometimes they do know once they see it, they're like, yes, 100%. But there was a very specific, so I was finally able to sort of extract out through conversation, because it was kind of leading down a path of, you know, I don't know what is at the heart of what is going to be, well, once again, meaningful, like for her. She's also a creative person. And it ended up being, like, after me, like, probing and probing and probing and asking, I'm going, oh man, this is going to be really difficult. She said, actually, there's this thing that she wears, and she had it on, and it was a Celtic knot, or a Celtic knot, sorry, Celtic. And it was a knot. It was in like this nice, shape woven around, and I was like, oh, how come that's important? Is there any particular meaning? And she was like, no. And she didn't delve into it. It was given to her by someone she didn't want to talk about, but she's always had it with her on every film shoot and everything. And it's been this important. It's been like so it had real sort of hidden importance, and that didn't really matter. The important was that it was important. So I just turned the A part of her name that was going to be the key thing, just this A, because that was one part that she did know that had to be, and I was like, okay. But then I just ended up using the same method by the way a Celtic knot weaves in and out to have an aspect of that in the logo. So same as what you, like it didn't look like a Celtic knot, but then to her, because we had talked about it, it was imbued with this meaning, and it can be.
It is a good word.
And
Yeah.
and I think that is important, because it doesn't have, like, it can be too. It can be apparent to everybody else. It can be more, in your face. It can be more illustrative, or it can have hidden meaning, which because it's not just about like the audience looking at it. It's also very much about, it's like you're giving, as a designer, you're giving almost a sort of present, in a way, like a very important representation to someone, and it's got this, you've put this meaning into it, injected. And it's like a little secret message that only they know about, but then they've got a backstory then also for it.
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yes.
they can talk to people about, which I really like them when people kind of run with that.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, and that becomes like, it's the starting point for like a conversation then for them about it can be woven, like, so to speak, like into their brand story, or their story, or what they do, or why they do it. And you can like
creates connection.
Link those things. If you can create that link, it's pretty powerful, hey?
Yeah, completely. And I think this is why I love that Canva exists, and that we can all have, like, just the level of design in the world took a massive step up when Canva made their business look pretty good without a lot of skills. But I think it does it's a lifeless brand in a lot of ways if you do a Canva brand, because, a lot of other people can have that same logo, and maybe it's not. Maybe you find the perfect thing that's like, this just means everything it's meant to say. But often you don't have that personalized touch on your brand that make you go, this is my business. This is my unique thing that I brought, because doesn't matter what you do. We're both designers. We're going to do it in different ways and for different reasons. And that's going to appeal to different people. And we've seen that in the group as well, which is really cool. I love how we're sort of positioned. I know you do a lot more web stuff than me, and maybe this is the Lego and the structure coming back. It don't
probably is.
On that.
Yeah, it is for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, my brother was a Lego fanatic. He's now a rocket engineer, and I'm a graphic designer. So
yeah, I mean,
that diverged.
It's true, but I think in many ways they're two sides of the same coin, because there's a very big part of me that likes how things are made, and to build them well, and to do that, but I've got an equal interest. Like, it's not, I've got one foot in the designer camp and one foot in the developer camp, very, like, really quite evenly. And that's always been something that I just can't escape from, and I don't want to, but it's always like, I like it looking beautiful and on brand and everything that it should be, and well made at the same time, which is why I'm sort of drawn to designing and developing apps too, because they bring together like this, and this can be like an interesting segue too, like, for the conversation, because it's one thing that I had written down was to talk about your thoughts about these days where print, like brand design, print design, and digital design, now in this world where those things meet, like for you, like what's your, very broad perspective on where things are going, like, not necessarily design trends, but how like some of those things like devices and stuff actually influence, because I've seen this sort of influence on, or I feel like is an influence on branding trends and branding perception through the, the myriad of ways to view it. Like, it's an influence. It's a real, what do you think about that?
Oh, 100%. And the funnest example, we're going to get nerdy here in a second, is a typography example
Yeah.
I had recently. So maybe 10 years ago, brands all started going to sans serif fonts, which for those who are not familiar, which would be most people, serifs are the tiny little feet on the bottom and top of letters. You'll definitely notice this in newspaper print, in books, but often on websites and digital mediums, you don't see these kind of fonts. Everyone went to this sans serif style, so without those feet. And that was because pixels, we didn't have enough pixels to make all that detail that created the serifs.
Nice and smooth.
And now our screens are getting way more pixel dense, way more high resolution. We have these incredibly beautiful screens in our pockets and our laptops.
More high resolution than print, actually.
Yes.
Yeah,
which is insane.
It is insane, yeah.
And now we can have all kinds of fonts. So serif fonts are having resurrection in the design world in the last few years, as we've realized that there's no reason to not use them anymore.
Yeah, that's a great example, actually. That's a really good example of how the mechanisms by which things are delivered influence like how you do them. And like just taking a step back, like some hundreds of years, we've been looking at home, like partially for homeschooling, but partially just because it's really interesting, books that you can get on the Internet Archive. So the internet, you would go nuts for it, Kate. Like I have to actually show it. Like I'll send you, I'll choose some of the good ones to send over to you as PDFs, because Google's got this, if people listening aren't aware, they've got this amazing initiative, not sure how it's been running for, with the Internet Archive, to scan in every book, like old and especially older books, in and distribute them for free on the Internet Archive. And so, yeah. And so there's, oh my gosh, you just like from a designer point of view, was seeing, handset lead type or metal type, seeing that in action from some of these very old books that are scanned in, and just my mind thinking how time consuming that is. And then secondly, just the way in which that informs, like similar to what we're talking about, but some 100 years ago, how that informs how people have to think about that in the first place. And it kind of, I was like frying my brain, like literally thinking about it. Because for people listening who don't sort of know, like when you're talking about lead set type or other some of like the big things were made out of wood things originally too, and they used to have in all different sizes, like individual letters or whole words, and then the term leading, which you sometimes hear, is like the actual strips of like actual lead in between lines of text. And so that's where you get that original term, and they'd have bigger or smaller spaces in those strips of lead. And I'm like looking at these scanned PDFs, like visualizing in my mind, because I'd had, I still actually have somewhere, I've got some old lead set type and big wooden blocks.
I've got, I think a Cascon Pro, incomplete, but found it at an antique shop, the lead pieces.
Oh, they're amazing. And so then cool. They're all in reverse too. Yeah. So they're all in reverse. So people have to, and I was going, and I haven't thought about it in years. I was going, okay. And so this is like a description very broadly for everyone listening, is these people had to, there was an original handwritten draft from somebody. Then they had to, and I assume like be proofed by other person or persons, because then once you got it down and you do like strike off to test it, and then if there was a mistake, they'd have to go in through these words. They would have had, no doubt, like people get super awesome at these kind of skills. They probably would have been like super fast, like with all these little bits of type on a page, always then justified, so straight on the left and the right. So you've got all these, then looking at these pages, you can't help but then you see, because it's just, and there's like hundreds and hundreds of pages in these books. And then they like have to do it in reverse from, like even talking about it now, I'm like,
I know, I'm confused, but yeah, all these tiny lead pieces, and as soon as one thing's changed, oh, there's a typo, then you've got to find a block that makes it fit. Like you said, this is justified. You can't just take that extra R out or whatever that's there. Then you need to space the rest of that line out to fit.
And then just the craftsmanship to make them in the first place. Like all this stuff. You got all this, like, there's lead type, and there's like whole words often too, but and no doubt these people would have been amazingly good at setting it all. Anyway, I'm just looking at these books, and they're all like, slightly out. So there's these little sort of ebbs and flows in it because it's not perfectly straight. I'm like, that's just the most beautiful thing I've seen in ages. And I hadn't, just not because of as all these like options we do now on the computer. And that's like, I wouldn't trade that for anything. It's great set of tools. Like, they're incredible. And that's, I love the tools that we use, but just looking at these things and being transported back to it, just how that informed people's thinking about that task and the books and the deliberateness they would have had to have had for it.
And it comes back to what we were saying about the brief before. The more tight the brief becomes, or the harder or weirder, or it doesn't make sense, or that's going to be difficult, it actually makes you more creative in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So constraints would have actually, it created some movements that we wouldn't have had without that quote unquote technology.
And I had a theory, and I run this by you because I had this realization, because most of the typography is more, they be as creative as they're able to be within the confines of like all this stuff. And there's different size fonts, but, and spacing. But then when they have the opportunity, when I was looking like at some of these books, then there's these parts where someone's done, hand calligraphy that's absolutely nuts, absolutely nuts. So I'm like, oh my, and some of this too, I'll have to find some of these bits in particular in this one book and send it to you. It's like so beautiful and crazy skill. And they would have been like these really distorted type that goes down and comes up, and it's like all these flourishes. It's all hand done. And I had this theory, and I thought, I wonder if, like, outside of just the time it was done, and that was how things were done, but because there was such like the outlet of then wanting to perhaps, like, the people who were doing it, like the designers of those time, publishers, that their style was informed by the restrictions of these other things. So their outlet became so much more, if you want to use the loose term, creative or elaborate, because they weren't able to do it in the other aspect of the main book publishing and laying out. So that the outlet was like funneled into these other areas, like the titles and things. And I thought, I wonder if that was why, or if it's like a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
And I'm sure it is, but I think it comes down to the more restrictive a brief gets, the more creative you have to be to execute on it. And if you've only got this one, so maybe the type's going to be all here, and you've got this one spot that's going to be the wood block, I guess, because that's going to be super custom. You've got that one spot to make it pop, to use a term that we all hate.
It's true. I've come to terms with that term.
Make the logo bigger. You go all out to make that work. Whereas if you had the whole page to do anything you want, that's almost too overwhelming. If I can do anything I want, I don't know what to do. It's choice paralysis, and we get less creative because of it.
It's true. And anyone listening who doesn't believe that, just give it a go. Even if you're not a designer, just have a crack at something and see what happens, because the natural inclination is like exactly what you said. And I theorize that, like, the more everyone listening, the more you talk to me, the more you realize I've got a lot of theories about everything. I've got a million of them. They're all there, flying everywhere. So one of my other theories is that that's why people left MySpace literally overnight and went to Facebook. And my theory is, because this was my observation about myself in retrospect, was that I remember years ago using MySpace, and for those of you who never used MySpace, like, Facebook now is a relatively, like, it's really content, emphasis on people's content, and then the rest of the framework, the interface, everything is fairly clean and simplistic. At the time, because Facebook wasn't around, MySpace was like the polar opposite. It was like, get everything that you could get in the world possibly, and they had a huge range of design options for most people who aren't designers to do whatever they like on their MySpace pages. And so everyone's MySpace pages, including mine, that I thought was really cool at that time, was, I remember specifically having this page, and I can't remember, I had some stupid crap on it. I can't remember, I think I had like some cats and some drawings and like some rubbish, it was just, had no direction. It didn't have to, because it wasn't about anything. It was just about me. It was like, this was stuff I liked. And I had all sorts of stuff on it. And I remember thinking how great it was and how creative it was. And then I remember Facebook was very new, and I remember going over to Facebook, and I still remember this very specifically for some weird reason, like, forget heaps of other things, but I remember this. I remember going over to Facebook and going, oh my God, it's so boring. That's so boring, because I compared it with my super
customized,
pretty shitty though. But then in a very short amount of time, and I can't remember whether this was, I think it was days, and I remember then going to Facebook and signing up for Facebook and still thinking it was pretty boring looking, but then having this realization about how it was used, like the mechanism, how it was used, and then instantly looking at my MySpace page like it was rubbish. Like, I was like, what's wrong with me? Like, did someone like put drugs into my drink or something? Like, how am I feeling this when only a short while ago I thought it was awesome? And it was really perplexing. I remember at the time going, yeah, it's no good. It's really awful. And
do
then
you think it was
I abandoned it, and then everybody else did. And I thought, well, is it either two things? Either everyone else is similar to me and the same thing is happening, or other reasons. But I always thought that's an example of what we were just talking about, of lack of, specificity, or whatever you want to call it. And you could do anything, equated to the whole brand of MySpace, essentially, which becomes a conglomeration of all these people's rubbishy MySpace pages, ends up really, like, if you think about it, ends up being the brand. And I think that was the ultimate, because now people think they get that, they go, yeah, it's content, but the brand, like Facebook's brand and how they do things, still, they've got control over that, and that's what they were doing at the time, even if they maybe didn't realize it, and it changed a lot since then.
But yeah, you knew you were looking at a Facebook page, whereas a MySpace page,
it was just a rubbish. Yeah, it could be. Exactly. And the only thing that, helped you identify it was the MySpace logo somewhere, which I think, I can't remember if it was like
time ago.
Yeah. And then they tried to reboot it. There was like a Brisbane agency Did you know about that?
No.
It was like in Brisbane some years ago, MySpace, and this was oh no, it was actually longer. There was Joseph Mark studio, which is still in, I think they're still in Brisbane and then LA. And they, at that point, that launched them into like the stratosphere in terms of being like huge. Justin Timberlake at the time, remember Justin?
Yeah.
Our boy Justin.
JT.
What's up, Justin? He used to be in the Mickey Mouse Club, I think, and with
Brittany.
Anyway, Justin. Anyway, apart from his history, he was like the main investor or person behind the rebranding and recreation of MySpace, which became it wasn't like the shitty version with all the stuff we were talking about. It was rebranded and redone by Joseph Mark at that time as this kind of interesting music platform. And they did it was like really amazing job. And I haven't since then, which is many years ago, I haven't looked to see whether it's still around, but it was almost like it was completely rethought as a thing.
As a
and
yeah.
risky because it was like a brand that became kind of at the time, I guess, like poisonous. It was like a abandoned piece or, sort of brand out in the back lot that everyone left overnight.
Weeds growing up around it, yeah.
Yeah, poor on MySpace. I always felt a bit sad for MySpace, actually. It's like a actual creature.
Yeah. I wonder if this is similar to, I never really got into Instagram until they started stories because I felt it had to be so curated with the feed because it was so visual and it could be beautiful. And I didn't really post much because I wasn't always in the mood to curate things. With stories where you could just throw anything up and it's gone in a day. It started this process of, I think, being more creative because you would just make stuff. You just make content. And this is why we've got this crazy amount of content in the world now because anyone could do it. You could do it in the blink of an eye. It didn't have to be good. You just put it up there. And I think that's when Instagram really just.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's that stories, and you see that across other platforms. They got sort of similar. I think people then across different tech platforms are sort of cottoned onto that idea that it's an ability for people to put stuff up that doesn't have to kind of specifically have a really, like you were saying, like a curated purpose, but then just by it being up there, it can establish meaning over time. Like it creates these different stories, and that I think it's maybe a realization about those platforms realizing over time through observation and data how people even use their content, like what they, and that takes some years, which then for design, I'm just getting back to the point about how things have changed. Specifically, do you see a change or have in the past or seeing at the moment a change in what, the trends, not specifically what you or I do, but trends about logos becoming like this or like that. Have you observed anything like that because of the way we take in information through devices and other stuff?
Yeah, 100%. I guess there was the great simplification of everyone's logos that sort of, I think it was at its peak around 5 years ago, I would say. Even longer.
Stripping everything back.
Yes, you saw many logos. I love what Warner Brothers did actually, because Warner Brothers, we all know, had this kind of, I think it was blue and gold, and it was this shield, and it was shiny, and it always WB in the middle. and, very iconic, but very complicated in lots of ways. A lot of color going on, shading, shining, all this stuff. And then they took out all of that and it was just a white silhouette. And they've used it beautifully because they could put any of their many creations, their films, within that silhouette of a shield. And then you know it's the movie and it's Warner Brothers, and it was beautifully done. What they did with their simplification was it didn't take anything away from the original brand, I don't think, from the classic brand, because that shape was so iconic to us all.
I agree. Yeah.
But then they could use it in such a more versatile way. So in a lot of ways, a very simple logo can become so much more interesting and varied. If the mark itself is very simple, you get a lot more bandwidth to play with it and still keep your,
I like how I'm not sure whether you've observed this, but in the world of cinema, like you see it with a lot of different movies, that trend that's probably been around for a while now, actually probably for a lot longer than I think it has, of say like if it's Village Roadshow or like the different movie production companies or even Warner Brothers, to theme in the application of the logo for the movie, so that things look like stone, or that they look like, or they have like the Village Roadshow, and either comes in and things, they still have a certain set of things of how they do them, like for this brand or this brand or this brand, and they have to tick those boxes. But then the movie, the production company or like themes it in, like I know Lord of the Rings. I remember probably more specifically Lord of the Rings, and they change the colors up, or they change the way it's rendered, or you see Disney do that too sometimes with their iconic like the
castle.
The castle, sorry. Which I know is actually based on a specific castle in, I think, Austria or Germany somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, that's like a crazy, like actually looks like that.
Cool.
Not sure how I know that fact, but I do know it's true. It's a true thing. I'm not making it up, everyone. Or maybe I am. You should go and check for yourself.
I haven't been to Austria, so I cannot prove or disprove.
Search. Well, you're the travel person. You need to go.
I know. It's on the list. I'll go and research it for us one of these days.
Yeah. No, so, but like, the whole logo, the thing that for some reason, I always have observed over the years, I don't go to KFC, right? I don't use KFC, but I've always found it really fun and curious when I'm driving past to see the evolution of the Colonel. Like I'm not sure whether, because he's gone from, like, I don't have his design lineage in my head, but I have noticed that he's actually come full circle. Now they are using Kentucky Fried Chicken again as a term, which they abandoned for a long time. And they turned it to KFC, and then that had been for a long time. But the Colonel he increasingly became more vector and a little bit more simplified. And then eventually at one point, I remember they put an apron on him like he was one of the workers at KFC. And then they turned him like a little bit on the side. And then his smile seemed to increase over time. Like he became more sort of happy, because it was like really serious for like a long time.
Yeah.
Remember, like he never used to have a smile. And so I thought that's a really interesting example of a company that's like, it's only like people like us that probably notice these things. People were just like thinking, but there's been really different changes, and it's been quite different, but you wouldn't know it unless you put them all in a row. And I think these days they've made him a bit more detailed again, and then they've changed the font again to a bit more sort of old school Kentucky Fried Chicken
back
stuff.
to the vintage look.
Again. And you see that McDonald's too, they go through these very proactive changes of making it like a little bit different, but not too different. And they transition them like a fair bit over time, which, what do you like? I guess that's to keep things fresh, so to speak, even though they're not fresh.
I call that a brand refresh, actually, with when I do this for clients. It's fresh. It's not like you're changing something beyond recognition, so it's not really a rebrand. You're not changing anything fundamentally, but you're taking what you have and maybe you're just modernizing it, or maybe you need it. Yeah, maybe the colonel needs to be happier because suddenly a serious male figure on a restaurant isn't appealing anymore.
It's moving with the times.
Yeah, you're just doing something, tweaking something to create something a bit new, something that moves more in the direction that you want your brand to go. And this can be a really nice way to transition over time rather than hold on to something old for a long time and go, it's not really working. It's really getting really bad. Okay, we need to rebrand, pivot completely. And then you lose a lot of brand recognition because the colonel's gone all of a sudden. And they're like, who is this KFC? Is that Korean fried chicken? I don't know if I want to go there anymore.
Yeah, although Korean fried chicken is pretty popular.
Yeah, actually, it's arguably better.
It's very popular. But like the thing about like there's, I guess, like a lot of things people like in all sorts of small business can learn, like not necessarily in that same way, but like reasons why, when and why and how you would do a brand refresh, like in the first place, because like a lot of these terms, like they're especially these days, which is good too, that people are much more across brand, like these terms that people used to be. There's some, however many years ago, you'd say people wouldn't really know what it even really meant. And some, like, it's a bit of broad term for a lot of people, but like they, like brand, refresh, when, in your experience, when do people usually come to talk about a brand refresh with you?
Different reasons. Often it's the people who've created that Canva logo or the Fiverr logo, and they actually love it. It's everything they actually want to represent their business. They're super happy with it, but they're like, well, it's not a unique mark of ours. Other people can use this because it's, everywhere, which is often the case with, as you know, Fiverr stuff. If you can do something that cheap, you're just pulling vectors off the internet that lots of people have access to and use that to create a professional grade of logo, but not a professional standard, I would say.
Yeah.
And so we can refresh it to make it unique. And oftentimes they don't have that professional standard file, the vector files. So we can create that. And that can be one form of a refresh. It's like, okay, we've not changed super much, and it's still very recognizable. Even if you had the old logo on a document, maybe you printed 1,000 flyers, you can still use them. No one's going to go, oh, that's not your business. This is a whole different business. They're still going to get it. And it can be something you do maybe every 5 years for a smaller business. I mean, McDonald's probably does a version of this every year.
They seem to. They definitely seem to.
But they have they've got a massive team, a global team that works on this and makes sure everything's updated. But if you wanted to look at this kind of thing, maybe every 5 years is a time to go, does our logo look dated? Does it represent the mood that we want to portray anymore? What is the global climate or the market climate like? If you're just Brisbane based, you're like, well, what are Brisbaneites like these days? Is it a happy time here? Is it, what's inflation saying about the climate that we're in right now? And how does my logo and my brand fit into that? And if it's not quite fitting anymore, you go, well, it could be a bit more somber. I think people want something just slightly more serious these days. We look a bit too flippant. Maybe that's the tiny little refresh that you do, or maybe you're too serious and you want to be a bit happier, and that's what the clientele are looking for. They want to be uplifted by something, and you're that. So I think these are good reasons to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I mean, all those things and more probably too. But I'll just ask you a question on that subject too. Is like, where do then you find people, like the point at which people come to an expert in this area, like us, to talk about these things, and they're coming for advice like we would if we go to someone for same sort of reasons for other services or products. But it's different. It's a bit different in ours because there's the association, and it's, with sort of creativity and things that most people associate with being able to be, in some instances, with being subjective, like it's how I feel about it, or and that's different to a bunch of just transactional things where you go, oh well, like with accountancy related things, there's some things that just are what they are, and there's no sort of like interpretation or creative interpretation in it. So where does like that, like how much of a thing these days, specifically, do you find that because many people are more across like this, the importance of things we're talking about, that they just, that same subjectivity about their likes and dislikes plays more or less of an important part in like their decision making, like when, you show them something and people, and it's not taken away from the fact that that is important, because we were talking about that before, that, things having meaning, but then there's a line between, who knows better or not better in, that fine line. It's sort of tricky. How do you feel about that whole creative subjectivity part of it?
Yeah, gotcha. This is a good question. And I think this comes down to a little bit of, I think, what they call psychographics in branding. So within a niche or a demographic, you've got many different types of people. You mentioned films before. I don't watch movies at all. I don't know what happened, but that just fell off the planet for me. I haven't watched a film in a year. I usually do it because someone else really wants to, and I go, all right, we'll do that. But you do, I'm guessing, because that's something you've got eyeballs on.
Also, funny you should say that, is that actually that's weird, because I actually haven't as much.
Okay. And maybe that's a bit of a trend in general.
Or YouTube probably.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe we're all moving away from
probably.
Film. But also there is I have a housemate and he loves films, does not want to watch series. He's not about all that. He loves films, and he'll come and tell me about movies all the time, even though he knows I'm never going to watch them and I don't really like them. But these are two different psychographics, and what a movie buff is going to think about things and what I'm going to think about things is different. And you can get into that mindset of these people and go, okay, so my clients are movie buffs. That's just the kind of people that are going to work for. Maybe this is even more specific. This is a marketing campaign, and you're getting into the mind of these movie buffs for this particular marketing campaign. And the brand of that campaign has to appeal to them.
Yeah.
So 100%. Blue doesn't mean trust to everybody, and a different shade of blue is going to mean something different to someone else. But you can narrow it down a little bit to go, all right, these people are really into, I was having this conversation with the aforementioned Andrew Komenos the other day about a shade of blue. There was a restaurant with a blue awning, and for me it didn't say Greek at all. It was the wrong shade of blue, but for him it did. And I wonder if it's because he's looking for Greek restaurants more. He's the kind of guy who loves a good Greek restaurant. He's looking at blue restaurants going, oh, Greek food. Whereas I saw it and I just went, that's a weird
Just
color.
for broadly blue. I mean, there's a lot of different nuances then too, because like we might be looking at it, and unless it's communicated, it's like super easy to not for everyone to be talking the same language and hearing completely different things. That you're saying blue and you're thinking a specific blue, and he's saying blue and he's thinking all blues, or like a certain and that's only because he's just not, thinking about color in the same way that we just like happen to, like, because he's a different sort of person. He's wired, his brain's like wired to think about other things in a different way. And there's all that too, but it's easy to, I guess part of that question too is addressing this thing that does happen sometimes, that doesn't always, but it's enough that I brought it up, where people put into the melting pot of design, they put in art and they put in all creative stuff. They just go, it's all creative stuff. Like people go, oh, you're a creative person. And I'm often like, I know heaps of people who aren't designers who are like way more creative thinkers than a lot of like other, because that's what I sort of think of as true creativity, is like creative thinking. There's like application of it, and then there's good creative thinking. But then you've got people putting all creative stuff into the melting pot, and they apply the same rules to how they view, I guess their right, or, want to go, I like this sort of art, or I like that. And that's sort of how it should be, because that's like, interpretation, what you like, what you don't like. And there's and you buy this piece of art, or you like this sort of music, and everyone generally accepts that. And then people are like, oh, I don't like rap, I like classical, I like both, I like all. But then they apply those same things to design, and that's also valid, but it's different than when you're thinking about it for your business, because then there's these other factors come in that like have to be considered, right?
Definitely. And yeah, this is so interesting. And if you're McDonald's or Aldi or these big brands, you have drilled down into all of these subcategories of people and targeted them all in their own way, on their own platforms, the ways that they like to absorb media. But if you're, you or me, small business, trying to create a brand that resonates with your market and going, oh, should it be cornflower blue or dark blue? It's not really the answer. I used to always think that branding, and in a larger, more global perspective of those big brands, this is true, that the brand is for the customer. But like you said before, the brand is also for the business owner, especially in these early days or the small business environment.
Very much so.
Because your customer is working directly with you most of the time. Even if you get a few employees and there's a bit of a layer, you're influencing them directly. You've created this whole business. It's your creation. It's going to reflect you in a lot of ways.
You gotta live with it.
Yeah. And the easiest way, I think, to attract your perfect customers is to be yourself. We all know that when we're ourselves, we actually attract people who we prefer to hang out with. If we put up a mask and pretend to be someone, we often end up with people around us that don't actually like us because they're liking what we've kind of put forward.
Yeah.
So if you take the same theory to branding and you create a brand that represents your personality, your values, your mission, your vision, other people are going to feel that and resonate with it. And I think that's the easiest way as a small business to get your perfect clients, because you can't have everyone. We're a small business. We're not McDonald's. We're not trying to market to everyone.
Yeah, well, the advantage, I guess, that, bigger organizations in whatever form, and I'll use Chemist Warehouse just in a second as an example, because I had a interesting observation about that the other day when we had to get something from there. But like they've got the advantage of more analytics, more data, more history, more experts, more trial and error that they've gone through, usually like a bunch of iterations, or doing it, realizing it's not working. They've got all that sort of history, like in retrospect, that makes everything easier and better, and usually more refined and more on the money eventually, even if it takes like longer. But I was like, it's like things that are fit for purpose. Like we're talking about, like you might have small business brand that has, doesn't 100% know the exact target market yet, like, because you're not really at that point. You only realize it later on. And these are things like that heaps of people just don't know. And that's fine. Like you can't be expected to know everything. Therefore, the brand is a safer bet to have, like, sort of targeted, but then broad appeal, and just sort of find a good midpoint and still do all the things we're talking about. But then you've got a place like Chemist Warehouse that knows that it was really apparent. Like I think I always knew it. Like they're always like, good prices they'll beat. It's all price. It's all about price. And so their whole brand, like my observation, I haven't talked to like the people doing it, but like I'm pretty sure it'd be right. It's all about price. So everything that they do, even though aesthetically it's like, it's not, it's just cheap, but it's exactly right. And we went in, and the three of us, like I can't remember what it was, just some chemistry stuff, and went in there, and it was the one over at near Garden City. It was like a bigger one, and they had these gigantic, big, fat, red and black and white, like sort of words, and it was just boom, like cheap, but it was like so effective. And it was probably also specifically, they had like these higher ceilings and stuff, and they had it all, but it was like really, and I was really kind of impressed in the way, even though it looked sort of like horrendous, like in one
Effectively ugly.
Yeah, effective, but it was like super effective because it had the exact desired effect on me, even though I wasn't buying whatever it was in the big fat writing. But I was like, yeah, you're cheap. That's exactly what it's exuded out of the pores of its skin. It was like pouring out like a river, like all over me. And it was up high too, so it was like it was pouring out. It was like cheap, 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 cheap. And it was like but it was exactly how it should be. And I was like, that's a fantastic example of them knowing exactly who the target market is and delivering on every aspect, even to the kind of not dodgy, but to the sort of not high end or nice looking way things were set up. Like it was neat and everything, but it's just that cheapness about it.
Yeah.
And it was all, and I know it's carefully thought through.
Yeah.
And I was really,
got all that data.
And I was really sort of impressed. I was like, that's really quite good. And then
they're not focusing on a demographic because they have a bunch. They have young women because they've got this whole massive makeup section. They've got elderly people who, have 8 prescriptions that they need to
fill. All their meds,
they've got, mum and dad who need toothpaste and this and that. They've got all these different demographics, but the one overarching thing is all these people want something at the lowest possible price. So that's the personality that they've put into it, and it goes across all of those sub demographics.
And the funny thing is then too about that, because I think there was one particular time where I wasn't doing any market research on anyone. I just observed there was one thing that I saw in there that definitely wasn't cheaper than somewhere else. And I was like, well, there you go. Super effective. Like it doesn't then actually have to be cheaper. Like it's just has to feel like it's cheaper. Yeah. And that's like way enough, because most people aren't going to go around and like do all the research, because they just got to get something. They just got to get it, and they're not gonna think about it. And I thought,
and it comes back to that feeling. You feel like you've got a deal.
The feeling, the feeling. It's 100%.
Whether you did or not. you walk out of Chemist Warehouse going, I got a bargain. I feel good.
But
right?
it's powerful. Yeah, 100%. It's powerful and it works. And then you keep going back because of then in its own weird way, that trust in that. A lot of people don't think it through. They're not analyzing themselves. They're just doing stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure I do in any number of ways. I just like do stuff and I don't think about it. And just because otherwise, if you analyzed everything, you go nuts. You just like your brain, like started to happen to me when I was looking at that typography PDF I told you about. And I was like thinking, and I was like, whoa, slow down. It was like it was getting too much because I was just like imagining like the people doing all their sort of things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is about making it simple and making it easy for people to make that decision. When you see their marketing, you go, oh yeah, I know that that's going to be a good price. I don't have time to research everything. I'm just going to go there. Whereas a lot of other places, it might look like I'm going to have a nicer shopping experience, or I might get a higher quality product. But if that's not what I care about, then I'm going to go the other way. So yeah, branding is helping you make a decision as well.
So what do you, like, we've been talking about a lot of different design related things, haven't we, Kate? So, and I would like to know, as we're getting towards like the pointy end of the podcast, I'd like to know what you love most about what you do. What do you love most? Like, yeah, and if it's too hard, you can give a couple of things. Because I know there's like a lot of, if someone asked me that question, I'd be like, oh man, there's like big list. But like some of the really standout things now with a bit of like history behind you and like, you know, having more feedback. Like, what do you love most about doing what you do?
It is what I mentioned at the start, is that I have this amazing balance of customer service and the relationship with the clients that I work with, and the ability to go and shut myself in a room and be a complete introvert and just design and go into that flow state and create things and, you know, not have to talk or think in a, you know, social way. So it's this merger.
Yeah.
And honestly, the best feeling for me, I do my brand presentations on a call like this usually, or in person, and I show them 3 concepts. And the best feeling is when they go, I don't know which one to pick. When they're just, then I know I've done my job, and that's the statement that makes me the best in the world.
It is. I mean, I'm similar to you. It's a really great feeling because it's got like things, and it gets back to kind of the I guess like the central theme of, you know, our podcast, like that the meaningfulness of like behind things. It's really, I mean, it's easy to throw these terms around, but like it's really, I mean, by its nature, the term is important, but it is like, it's really good and it makes you feel good. But if have that real world impact, like for somebody, I mean, I always kind of, you know, it always feels like a really important responsibility, but it's so like, it's really exciting when you get it really right for people. And it's really fun too, obviously. That's kind of why we do it. That's
why we started.
Because it's really, really fun. But it is really rewarding. And and also, could you just as like segue from that into, you're going to give us a quote as well. You got all organized and you've got a quote.
Yeah.
So what is it, Kate Smith, brand designer?
It is one of the branding legends of the world, now past, Steve Jobs. He said, a brand is simply trust. And this is all it comes down to. It doesn't, in the end, it matters how your brand looks, but what matters more is that what it says actually is real. So if you've created a brand that says cheap, like Chemist Warehouse, and you deliver on that promise, the brand gains credibility. You trust it more. Oh, it is cheap. I'm going to go back. Oh, it was cheap again. I'm going to go back. You trust that brand. If you make your brand look high end because you give the best service there is, and people go and they get the best service that there is, they're going to build trust with that brand. So in the end, it doesn't matter 100% exactly what your brand looks like. It should give some cues, of course: cheap, expensive, fun, serious, trustworthy.
Yeah.
But you need to build that trust, and that is the overarching meaning of brand, is the trust factor. It's what people think about your business. That is your brand.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's great. And you explained that really well for people listening too, because sometimes that can be a bit of a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around when you're not used to thinking about it. I remember that, and this was it was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me some years ago with a client, like with me unwittingly being on the flip side of receiving feedback about things, where usually the people, like, you do something for people and then we're talking from this perspective as the people. And I had this guy who's now been like a long-term client, I think, for like, 10 plus years. And when we had a very first meeting, like, he was introduced to us just by a link to look at our work on the website. Like, and unlike some people are, they go, check these people out. And we're having this meeting and we're having like and he hadn't like talked about anything he'd seen or experienced on the site or anything like that. And then he sort of stopped and he was sort of smiling, and I was like, what is that? I wasn't sure what that meant, and then he was like, you know what? He was like, I'm really, really happy. I was like, where's that? And he was like, because I was really hoping that what I end up, and I'm pretty sure he used the word feeling, that what I felt and sort of saw on your website was how you would be. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's like never happened to me. But
that is the goal. You nailed it.
Yeah. And I didn't. Yeah. And then but the fact that he said it when, like, also heaps of people wouldn't even sort of say that, they often don't have a reason, but that he was hoping that was the case. And there was like a really literal, that's like the only time probably that's quite happened like that. And I was like, and I was kind of a bit lost for words. I was like, I was trying to process it because I'm always on the other side of the fence. And then I was like, that is so wonderful. Like, thank you. And then and to this day, I've thought about that person saying that to me, and I thought, interesting. Because then I knew, like, for the first time, perhaps how sometimes like other people would feel, like when it happens to them, like and I'd never had that experience. And I was like, wow, that's like, finally I've got like that proof that like, that's the feeling, because then I had it.
That was a beautiful gift, because most people don't tell you, because they can't even articulate it themselves. They just have this feeling, I think I want to work with this person. They seem cool.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but he knew why.
Yeah. And he said it, and he was very articulate about it. And then, so yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about that meaning and trust, like you said. And how do people, so people listening, how do they find out more about UK? Like, we'll have some links in the podcast description, but where do they go online, and how do they find out more?
Amazing. I would say let's connect on LinkedIn. That's where most of my more recent stuff ends up. You can go to rovecreative.com.au, but of course that's always a little bit out of date. So yeah, come and talk to me on LinkedIn, Instagram. I try to post recent projects and have a bit more visuals up there. And yeah, let's get social, and I look forward to meeting you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. You're the best.
Thank you, Saul. This was really fun. It's great to talk to another designer and get a bit nerdy.
Yeah, I know. It's so much fun. And so thanks everyone again for listening as always. Much appreciated, and we'll see you again soon. And say goodbye to everybody listening, Kate.
Goodbye, everyone. Thanks, Saul, and have a beautiful day.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Grow Your Business. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time here at the Grow Your Business podcast.